Evolution, the universe's most sarcastic comedian, had a twisted sense of humor when it created the Krivax. Picture this, a terrifying fusion of a mantis and a Kodiak bear, covered in skin that looked like tactical armor. Add claws sharp enough to shred titanium, because, of course, why not? Standing an average of 9 feet tall with 4 multi-jointed limbs ending in those razor claws, the Krivax had evolved on Krivar Prime, a planet so deadly it made Australia look like a petting zoo. The Galactic Classification Committee, an organization tasked with rating planets based on how fast they could kill visitors, actually invented the term Deathworld after their first survey team to Krivar Prime vanished without a trace. The second team, armed with what was essentially a walking tank, barely lasted long enough to classify the planet as Deathworld Class 10 before fleeing. Krivar Prime boasted gravity 1.8 times the galactic standard, atmospheric pressure that would crush most life, radiation levels worse than nuclear waste, and weather that alternated between acid rain, plasma storms, and the occasional methane hurricane. The ecosystem didn't just want to kill you, it wanted to make an example of you. And yet, the Krivax thrived. Their biology was absurdly over-engineered, redundant organs, a metabolism that could digest nearly anything carbon-based, and a nervous system so resilient it could function for hours after suffering injuries that would be instantly fatal to most species. They even had 2 brains, working in tandem, giving them computational power that made quantum computers look like toys. When the Krivax achieved spaceflight, remarkably early in their development, the galaxy collectively held its breath. Typical first-contact protocols were thrown out the airlock when dealing with a species whose idea of a handshake involved potential disembowelment. But to everyone's surprise, the Krivax didn't launch a galactic conquest. Not because they were peaceful, there wasn't even a word for peace in their language, but because they were practical. Why conquer when you could demand tribute? As Grand Counselor Zebar famously said, "Better to have them signing treaties than signing our death warrants." Within a few centuries, the Krivax were the undisputed apex predators of the galaxy. They didn't need an empire, the mere mention of their name could make planetary defense systems shut down voluntarily. Their diplomats, slightly less aggressive versions of their species, mastered the art of threatening without shedding blood, while their military, the feared Fong fleets, mostly served as a reminder of what could happen. Those few foolish species that dared challenge the Krivax were quickly converted into hunting preserves, or, as everyone else called them, cautionary tales of cosmic stupidity. High Admiral Krostak, commander of the 7th Fong Fleet, was the embodiment of Krivax dominance. He once dismantled an attempted coup by 3 of his own officers without spilling a drop of blood, because Krivax blood was too valuable to waste. It was Krostak who received a strange report. Anomaly XC42197. A previously uncharted star system at the edge of the Orion Spur. Initial scans classified it as a Class 5 Deathworld, challenging but not extraordinary. But what caught Krostak's attention was the unusual concentration of artificial signals coming from one of its planets. A technologically advanced civilization on a Deathworld? Impossible. Executive Officer Krivax sputtered in disbelief. No species reaches spaceflight without first taming their environment. Krostak flexed his primary hunting claws, a thoughtful habit from his youth. And yet, the evidence says otherwise. Even stranger, they seem to have developed entirely without any prior contact with galactic civilizations. Primitives, then, Krivax grunted. Maybe they've just mastered basic metallurgy. But the data analyst, a Volrix named Pip, one of the few non-Krivax permitted aboard a Fong fleet vessel, interjected. With respect, Executive Officer, the signals indicate they have artificial satellites, space stations, and rudimentary interplanetary travel. Their radio transmissions suggest a global information network. They are on the verge of interstellar travel. Krostak's mandibles clicked in amusement. A Deathworld species about to join the galactic community. Fascinating. Plot a course. I will lead the contact team myself. Krivax tensed. Admiral, that violates protocol. Protocol was written by bureaucrats who've never stepped foot on a Deathworld, Krostak snapped. I didn't rise to this rank by delegating the interesting missions. As the 7th Fong fleet closed in, scanner readings became clearer, and more confusing. Admiral, this can't be right, Krivax stammered. These creatures have deliberately made their planet worse. They've weaponized nuclear technology, created self-replicating pathogens capable of extinction-level events, and are destabilizing their own atmosphere, on purpose. Krostak's claws clicked rapidly, the Krivax equivalent of a raised eyebrow. Either their survival instincts are completely alien, or they are more dangerous than their planet. Adding to the puzzle, their arrival hadn't gone unnoticed. The planet's primitive detection systems had been tracking them since entering the system. But instead of panic, the response was coordinated. Calm. They're hailing us, Pip reported, genuinely surprised. Transmission includes basic translation algorithms. They're welcoming us. Krostak's claws fully extended, a Krivax grin. How refreshingly civilized. Return the greeting. Inform them, we come in peace, but are prepared for anything. Krivax stepped closer, lowering his voice. Admiral, no species responds to first contact like this. Not unless they're either dangerously naive or dangerously confident. Krostak's voice rumbled with anticipation. Exactly. This will be interesting. As the fleet descended into orbit over the planet called Earth, Krostak noted the surface conditions with growing confusion. Atmosphere breathable, gravity 0.56 Krivax standard, radiation levels tolerable. Reported the science officer. Admiral, this planet isn't a death world at all. By all measures, it's a garden world. Krostak's secondary brain processed the revelation while the primary brain assessed the tactical implications. Impossible. The preliminary classification was based on their technological progress. We assumed only a death world could push a species this far this fast. The science officer hesitated. It seems, Admiral, the danger wasn't from the planet. It was always the species themselves. Krostak's mandibles spread wide in what his crew now recognized as both a smile and a warning. Prepare the contact team. This just became very, very interesting. As the Krivax stepped onto Earth, its comparatively gentle gravity made them feel unusually light. Their weapons were concealed but always within easy reach, though for the Krivax, their own bodies were weapons enough. Still, diplomatic protocol required them to maintain the appearance of peaceful intent. Their first direct observation of humans left the Krivax delegation confused, even disturbed. The bipedal creatures before them looked unfinished. Soft, exposed skin. No natural armor. Dull, flat teeth unsuited for tearing flesh. Blunt nails instead of claws. They had no redundant organs, no extra limbs, and not even basic defensive adaptations like venom or retractable spines. Are these truly the dominant species, or perhaps their servants? One junior officer asked quietly over the private comm channel. Scans confirm. These are the planet's apex predators, the science officer responded, as if trying to convince himself. High Admiral Krostak narrowed his compound eyes, focusing on the approaching human delegation. Despite their glaring biological weaknesses, the humans moved with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Here they were, standing face to face with beings who could tear them apart without breaking a sweat, and yet they showed no fear. Either humans were masters of emotional concealment, or, far worse, they genuinely didn't see the Krivax as a threat. Both possibilities were equally unsettling. A human at the front of the group, dressed in slightly more elaborate clothing, stepped forward. Krostak's xenopsychology implant struggled to classify the human's facial expression. The closest translation was, politely amused. On behalf of the United Earth government, welcome to our planet, the human said. The translation devices conveyed every word clearly. I am the Secretary General of the United Nations. We are honored to represent humanity for this historic first contact. Krivax stepped forward, making sure his movements appeared deliberate and non-threatening, an effort he rarely needed to make. I am High Admiral Krivax of the 7th Fong Fleet, representing the Krivax, and by extension, the Unified Galactic Council. The Secretary-General's expression shifted slightly. A galactic governing body already exists, fascinating. We had our theories, of course, but confirmation raises many questions. As does your existence, Krivax replied bluntly. Your species achieved spaceflight despite, he paused, adjusting his wording as updated environmental data came in. Despite severe evolutionary limitations. A ripple of what the translator labeled amusement moved through the human group. We prefer to think of ourselves as working with our limitations, not being defined by them, the Secretary-General said with a slight smile. But please, let's not stand here. We've prepared facilities for your comfort. Those facilities turned out to be a hastily converted convention center. The furniture clearly wasn't designed for beings twice the size of humans, chairs looked like they'd been pulled from construction sites, but it was a functional effort. Krivax scanned the room. He noticed the humans had arranged the seating to mimic the standard Galactic Council setup. A small but telling sign, they were quick learners. Clever. Adaptable. Concerning. Before beginning formal talks, Krivax spoke. I must first satisfy my curiosity. Our data suggests you evolved on this planet, yet by galactic standards, this world is remarkably benign. The Secretary-General glanced at a human dressed in what looked like a scientific advisor's uniform. Benign. That's an interesting description. Earth has shaped us through ice ages, meteor strikes, supervolcanoes, pandemics, and predators who saw us as lunch. Our history is survival against overwhelming odds. The science advisor added, Admiral, judging by your physiology, I suspect your homeworld is far more hostile than ours. But that doesn't negate the evolutionary pressures we faced. Krivax's mandibles clicked, barely suppressed amusement. Our perspective is shaped by empirical galactic standards. Kvar Prime has gravity 1.8 times this planet's, radiation that would kill your species in hours, and atmospheric pressure that would crush your bones. Every living thing on our planet is a predator. We developed spaceflight not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. Our world was running out of resources to sustain us. Rather than the fear he expected, Krivax saw fascination on the humans' faces. Extraordinary, the science advisor said. Your evolutionary path, it would take decades to fully study. This was not the reaction Krivax had anticipated. Most species responded to descriptions of Kvar Prime with horror. The humans, however, seemed intrigued. The Secretary-General interjected smoothly, more importantly, Admiral, what brings your fleet to Earth? While we welcome peaceful contact, the arrival of military vessels sends complicated signals. Krivax extended his hunting claws slightly, an unconscious gesture of tension, before retracting them. The Fong fleets serve many roles: defense, exploration, diplomacy. We are here to evaluate humanity's readiness to join the galactic community. Evaluate, the Secretary-General asked, his tone still polite but edged with caution. Krivax explained, standard procedure. All newly discovered spacefaring species undergo an assessment. It ensures stability and order within the galaxy. And, who conducts this assessment? Asked another human in a military uniform. Krivax replied, the species who discovers you. In this case, the Krivax. The military human leaned forward slightly. And if we were to decline? For a moment, both of Krivax's brains stalled. Decline. No species had ever refused assessment. The concept itself was so alien that it took him a second to process. Decline, Krivax repeated, the translator struggling to convey his mix of confusion and amusement. The assessment is not optional. It determines your place in the galactic hierarchy. The Secretary General's expression tightened. On Earth, we have a tradition of mutual respect between sovereign entities. Assessment implies hierarchy, not equality. Krivax scanned the humans again. No fear. No submission. These soft, fragile creatures were negotiating as if they stood equal to the galaxy's apex predators. Perhaps, Krivax said carefully, there is a cultural misunderstanding. The assessment is not to determine if you are worthy, but rather to understand your capabilities, and how you fit within galactic society. I see, the Secretary General replied. And how is this assessment conducted? Krivax relaxed slightly, thinking the tension was easing. A series of challenges, technological, intellectual, cultural, and martial. Martial, the military human repeated. You want us to fight you? Not fight, Krivax clarified. But demonstrate combat capabilities. Every species must prove it can defend its interests in the galaxy. The Secretary General and the military leader exchanged a glance. Then, to Krivax's surprise, the Secretary General's face transformed into a smile, this one flagged by the translator as predatory. We would be delighted to participate in your assessment, Admiral, the Secretary General said. In fact, we propose hosting it here, on Earth, where we can best demonstrate humanity's unique adaptations. Warning lights fired through Krivax's secondary brain. But his primary brain, the one that governed pride and dominance, overrode them. You wish to be assessed on your own world, Krivax mused. Unconventional, but acceptable. We will prepare an evaluation suitable for your species. Excellent, the Secretary General replied. And as a gesture of goodwill, we invite your delegation to experience some of Earth's culture before the assessment begins. Perhaps, you would enjoy watching one of our sports competitions. They showcase our physical capabilities in a controlled environment. Sensing an opportunity to gather intel on human combat potential, Krivax agreed. We would be honored. As the meeting ended, Krivax leaned close over the private channel. Admiral, their behavior defies all predictive models. They show no deference. No fear. It's as if they don't recognize their place in the natural order. Krivax watched the retreating humans, his mind racing. Perhaps, executive officer, perhaps they have a different understanding of the natural order. The next day, the Krivax delegation stood in what humans called a stadium, observing an event labeled an extreme sports competition. Krivax had expected to witness combat training, cleverly disguised as entertainment. What he witnessed instead, utterly defied expectation. Humans were willingly, even eagerly, throwing themselves. The Krivax delegation stepped onto Earth's comparatively gentle gravity, their weapons concealed but ready, because a Krivax never truly went unarmed. Their very bodies were weapons. But diplomatic protocol demanded at least the appearance of peaceful intent. Their first direct observation of humans left the Krivax in a state of cognitive dissonance. The bipedal creatures before them looked unfinished. Soft, exposed skin. No natural armor. Dull teeth unsuited for tearing flesh. Blunt nails instead of claws. No redundant organs. No secondary limbs. Not even basic defensive adaptations like poisonous secretions or retractable spines. Are these the dominant species, or their servants? One junior officer subvocalized on the private channel. Scans confirm. These are the planet's apex predators, the science officer replied, sounding like he was trying to convince himself. Krivax focused his compound eyes on the approaching human delegation. Despite their biological inadequacies, the humans moved with a confidence that bordered on absurd. Here they were, standing before apex predators of the galaxy who could dismember them without effort, and yet they showed no visible fear. Either they were evolutionary masters of emotional concealment, or they genuinely didn't perceive the Krivax as a threat. Both options were equally disturbing. The human at the front of the delegation, distinguished by clothing that appeared slightly more elaborate than the others, stepped forward with an expression Krivax's xenopsychology implant struggled to categorize. The closest approximation was, politely amused. "On behalf of the United Earth Government, I welcome you to our planet," the human said. "I am the Secretary General of the United Nations. We are honored to be humanity's representatives for this historic first contact." Krivax stepped forward, deliberately restraining his movements to appear less threatening, a courtesy he'd never before considered necessary. "I am High Admiral Krivax of the 7th Fong Fleet, representing the Krivax, and by extension, the Unified Galactic Council." The Secretary General's expression shifted slightly. "There's already a galactic governing body." "Fascinating. We had theories, of course. But confirmation, well, it raises many questions." "As does your existence," Krivax replied with unusual frankness. "Your species has achieved spaceflight despite evolving on." He paused, recalibrating his statement based on new environmental data. "Despite your evolutionary limitations." A ripple of what the translation software identified as amusement passed through the human delegation. The Secretary General's lips curved upward. "We prefer to think of ourselves as working with our limitations, rather than being defined by them. But please, let's not conduct our first diplomatic exchange standing on a runway. We've prepared facilities for your comfort." The facilities turned out to be a hastily repurposed convention center, its interior modified to accommodate beings nearly twice the height of humans. The chairs looked like they'd been sourced from industrial equipment, not furniture stores, a reasonable adaptation. Krivax studied the room. The humans had arranged seating in a formation that mimicked the Galactic Council's typical layout. They had gleaned this from Krivax's preliminary transmissions. Clever. Adaptable. Concerning. "Before we begin formal diplomacy," Krivax said once seated, "I must satisfy my curiosity. Our preliminary data suggests you evolved on this world. Yet by galactic standards, this planet is remarkably benign." The Secretary General exchanged glances with a scientific advisor. "Benign? That's an interesting perspective. Earth has shaped us with ice ages, meteor impacts, supervolcanoes, pandemic diseases, and predators that considered us convenient snacks. Our history is written in survival against long odds." The science advisor leaned forward. "If I may, based on your physiology, I suspect your homeworld presents challenges that would make ours seem gentle by comparison. But that doesn't negate the evolutionary pressures that shaped humanity." Krivax's mandibles clicked, barely suppressing amusement. "Our perspective is based on empirical galactic standards. Kvar Prime experiences gravity 1.88 times what you feel here. Radiation levels that would kill your species within hours. Atmospheric pressure that would crush your bodies. Every life form evolved to kill every other life form. We developed spaceflight because our planet was running out of resources." The science advisor showed fascination instead of terror. "Extraordinary. Your biological adaptations must be remarkable." Not the reaction Krivax expected. Most species reacted to Kvar Prime's description with existential dread, not academic curiosity. "Perhaps more relevant to our discussion," the Secretary General interjected, "is what brings your fleet to Earth. While we welcome peaceful contact, the arrival of military vessels as first ambassadors sends mixed signals." Krivax's hunting claws extended slightly before he consciously retracted them. "The Fong fleets serve multiple functions: defense, exploration, and diplomatic outreach. We are here to evaluate humanity's readiness to join the galactic community." "Evaluate?" The Secretary General's tone remained diplomatic, but Krivax detected a subtle shift in their pheromones, caution, verging on offense. "Standard protocol for newly discovered spacefaring species," Krivax explained. "All members of the Unified Galactic Council underwent similar assessments." "And who conducts this assessment?" asked a military officer. "Traditionally, the species who discovered you," Krivax replied. "In this case, the Krivax." The military officer leaned forward slightly. And, if we were to decline this assessment? The question hung in the air like a plasma charge ready to detonate. Christak had never encountered a species that questioned the assessment protocol. His dual brains processed the implications in parallel. Decline. Christak's translator struggled to capture the mix of confusion and amusement in his voice. The assessment is not optional. It is how the galaxy maintains order and stability. The Secretary General's expression stayed neutral. On Earth, we have a tradition of mutual respect between sovereign entities. Assessment implies hierarchy, not equality. Christak's compound eyes shifted between the humans, searching for any sign of fear. There was none. These soft, fragile creatures were negotiating as if they stood on equal footing with the galaxy's apex predators. Perhaps, Christak said slowly, there is a cultural misunderstanding. The assessment is not about determining if humans are worthy of respect. It is to establish humanity's capabilities and contributions. I see, the Secretary General replied. And how is this assessment typically conducted? Christak relaxed slightly. A series of challenges to demonstrate your species' capabilities, technological, intellectual, cultural, and martial. Martial, the military officer echoed. You want us to fight you? Not fight, Christak clarified. Though, yes, combat capability is traditionally assessed. All species must be able to defend their interests. The military officer and the Secretary General exchanged a glance. Then, to Christak's surprise, the Secretary General smiled, an expression the implant flagged as predatory. We would be delighted to participate in your assessment, Admiral Christak, the Secretary General said with unsettling enthusiasm. In fact, we propose hosting the evaluation here on Earth, where we can properly showcase humanity's unique adaptations. Warning signals flared across Christak's secondary brain, but his primary brain, the one responsible for honor and dominance, overruled them. These fragile creatures wanted the assessment on their home soil. Their confidence, or delusion, was almost admirable. An unconventional proposal, Christak acknowledged. But acceptable. We shall arrange a formal assessment protocol. Wonderful, the Secretary General said. And to show our goodwill, we invite your delegation to experience some of Earth's cultural offerings before the assessment begins. Perhaps you'd enjoy observing one of our sporting competitions. They showcase human physical capabilities in a controlled environment. Christak, sensing an opportunity to gather intelligence, agreed. We would be honored. As the meeting concluded, Krivax approached Christak over the private channel. Admiral, their behavior defies all predictive models. No deference. No fear. It's as if they don't recognize their place in the natural order. Christak watched the retreating humans, the enigma of their confidence gnawing at his tactical mind. Perhaps, executive officer, they have a different understanding of the natural order.